Hello, my name's Claire. I'm speaking to you from West Wales. This is part 2 of the three stories of our time, which are stories that are presented inside the Work That Reconnects, a beautiful and potent process or body of work developed over 4 decades ago by a fantastic woman called Joanna Macy, looking at how we might unlock our action to stand up for life on this planet. So I talked of 3 stories of our time. One is business as usual, one is the great unravelling, and the third one is what I want to dive into more now. It's called the great turning. Check out the video, the first part 1 on the 3 stories of our time for more information on that. So the 3 dimensions of the great turning, which is meaning turning from a world that says business as usual is fine, we'll carry on raping the resources of our global ecology, etc., and we'll turn towards a life-sustaining society. So we need to unravel the business as usual story into the great turning. Now there are 3 dimensions, as I said, to the great turning, and each is as vital and as crucial as the other. We can't do the great turning without all 3, even though some of us may be drawn to participating in 1 or 2 of these dimensions. Some of us might be involved in all 3, but each one is as equally important as the other. So whichever place you find yourself, hooray! It's all needed, really is. So the first one is the holding action. Now this is action that holds back and resists and slows down the damage, or attempts to, the damage to our earth, and kind of wakes us up and tries to kind of ring the alarm bell, if you like. So things like Extinction Rebellion, or the Stop Ecocide campaign, or lawsuits against Monsanto, for example, or even boycotting corporations that endanger life in their activity, because we, the consumers, do have huge amounts of choice and power in changing things through our consumer habits. Anyway, that's another story. So this stage really slows things down, maybe gives time to halt some destruction of ecosystems, cultures, etc., ahead of the sustainable society that's going to come. But this alone isn't going to be enough. So we need dimension number 2, which is we have to understand the industrial growth society, or this capitalist system paradigm that we live in. We need to understand its dynamics, its structures, and only then can we understand how it does its damage, and what alternatives that we could creatively come up with. Because the human mind is incredibly creative. We're awesome in regard. So I'm sure we can come up with some kind of great ways of creating positive and solution alternatives. And this is going on already. So examples of renewable energy, co-housing, forest schooling, local food movement, regenerative agriculture, even different indexes of wealth. Like in New Zealand, I know they now measure wealth by well-being rather than GDPR. GDPR? I don't mean that. I mean by money. We measure it in a different way. And this is an incredibly important aspect because it holds the seeds for our future. They might seem marginal at the beginning. I was involved in solar energy 20 years ago, and look now where it is. It's amazing. It's so different how it's just everywhere you look, rather than before it's like, oh, you spot it occasionally on a house. So these structural alternatives are fantastic, but they cannot really take root in our society and survive without the deeply ingrained values to sustain it. So we have some deeply ingrained values that I don't think are particularly good for life on our planet or sustaining life. But there are some other values that we need to move towards. So a profound shift is needed. And it is happening, and it is accelerating. You just have to look around as well. So there are, the deep ecology, living systems theory. These are all kind of science ways of looking at nature as a thriving, or we hope it to be thriving, as a living entity, essentially. Other consciousness shift of kind of might happen. This change in perception, engage Buddhism, for example, or eco-psychology. And we're also seeing a resurgence in kind of shamanic traditions coming through. So all of these kind of things are really important for shifting our mindset, our headspace, our perception into a new place. And that's when the seeds that we've created in the creating alternatives phase or dimension of it can really, really come into their own. And the holding action really gives us time to develop all these other dimensions and all these other things. So the realizations that we make in this place of consciousness shift, well, they can really save us from panic and stop us being paralysed. They help us not put our head in the sand and actually look out and turn to each other rather than turn on each other, which we see a lot happening in the world, which is just so sad. But instead, this consciousness shift enables us to turn to each other, come together, revere life together. Remember, we are nature and we can do this. We are incredibly creative, and we join hands and stand together to create this life-sustaining society that we want to take the great turning towards.